We live in an era obsessed with the idea of control. Never in history have we had so many tools, techniques and methods promising the key to success, productivity, and the perfect life. We have books teaching how to organize every minute of the day. There are talks that promise foolproof formulas for leadership. We take courses guaranteeing strategies to influence people, and even apps that monitor every heartbeat in search of greater performance. At first glance, it seems we have mastered everything, but have we really? The paradox is brutal. The more society creates techniques to control the external world, the more people seem to lose control of themselves. The number of anxious individuals has never been so high. Depression spreads like a silent epidemic, and a feeling of emptiness grows amidst an abundance of information and options. This reveals an uncomfortable truth. Perhaps the obsession with mastering the external world is not a sign of strength, but a sophisticated form of escape. Modern humans have learned to manipulate almost everything around them: machines, technologies, markets, even the image they project on social media. But when the gaze turns inward, when one must deal with the anger that arises without warning, with the desire that enslaves, or with the fear that paralyzes, it becomes painfully clear. This same person, so skilled at conquering the world, is often completely incapable of conquering their own mind. This contradiction is not new. Over 2,500 years ago, Buddha had already identified the fundamental error that continues to imprison us. Humans believe that suffering comes from the world outside. However, its true origin has always been within, in the mind that incessantly wishes reality were different from what it is. It is this infinite thirst, to want more, to want different, to want life to bend to our whims, that makes us prisoners. And this is where the central thesis of this message is born. It doesn't matter how many productivity methods you master, how many secrets of influence you learn, or how many external successes you accumulate. If you are still unable to deal with your own mind, if your peace depends on external circumstances, if your emotions still govern your choices,
is too much work. It desires rest. But when it rests, it feels restless for not being productive. This thirst manifests in all dimensions of life. In the material realm, it's the desire for more money, more possessions, more status. In the emotional realm, it's the yearning for recognition, attention, and approval. In the existential realm, it's the desire for life to never bring pain, loss, or frustration. It's as if the mind is perpetually at war with reality, and the more it desires, the more it suffers. The problem is not having desires, that is natural. The problem is being dominated by them. Thirst knows no bounds. An achieved goal is quickly replaced by another, even greater one. A victory loses its flavor, immediately demanding new accomplishments. This cycle is endless. And this is precisely what traps the human being. No matter how much you achieve, your mind will continue to repeat, "It is not enough." This is the addictive nature of tanha. It is like drinking salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you feel. Every time you believe that you will only be happy when you achieve a specific external thing, a perfect relationship, an ideal body, or social validation, you strengthen this cycle of dependency. And when you finally attain what you desired, you find that the satisfaction lasts for only a moment. Soon, the thirst returns. Here is the cruelest detail. This thirst not only causes frustration, but it enslaves. Those who depend on the external world to satisfy their desires are always vulnerable, because the world cannot be controlled. Circumstances change. people fail. Unforeseen events happen. Those who anchor their peace in external factors are like a castaway trying desperately to hold on in the waves. Buddha observed that this thirst is the root of all human suffering. As long as we remain trapped in this cycle, our lives will be governed by forces we do not control. We may believe we are in charge, but in reality, we are driven by impulses we never consciously chose. And this is the turning point. If this thirst, peace, security, and happiness, but experience shows exactly the opposite. The more an individual tries to control the world, the more they feel dominated by it. This phenomenon can be observed everywhere. Take productivity, for example. We have never had so many organizational tools, digital calendars, task apps, and time management methods. Yet we have never been so anxious, exhausted, and saturated. This happens because the attempt to control time does not resolve the underlying anxiety. The mind, enslaved by its own thirst, only creates new demands and generates even more crushing pressure. Another example is the desire to control people. Many believe that if they can shape others, partners, colleagues, subordinates, family members, then life will finally become predictable and satisfying. But this attempt inevitably leads to frustration, because no one can be entirely controlled. The other always escapes, always acts unexpectedly, always breaks expectations. The more you demand, the more you realize you have no power at all. This search for external control is, at its core, an escape. We flee from looking inward because facing our own impulses, anger, fear, envy, and neediness requires deep courage. It is much easier to project this battle onto the world, believing that by fixing the environment, others, or circumstances, we will resolve the internal chaos. It's like trying to put out a fire by throwing water on the walls while the flames burn inside the house. The illusion of control acts as an anesthetic. While we are busy with external achievements, we do not need to confront the most painful truth. We have no control over ourselves. A person who cannot observe their own mind and reactions becomes a slave to any situation. As soon as something goes awry, they are swallowed by anger, frustration, or fear. This reveals an uncomfortable fact. Behind the obsession with control lies only fragility. Buddha was direct in exposing this paradox. The more we try to manipulate the world, the more we become prisoners of it. Life will never obey our script. The unexpected will always happen. And as long as we continue to believe that peace depends on what is outside, we will live as emotional beggars, constantly asking reality, person, an obstacle. But Buddha's teaching cuts this narrative at the root. Suffering does not arise from external events. It arises within the mind. Reality in itself is neutral. Loss, frustration, change, failure, all of these are facts that belong to the natural flow of life. But what transforms these facts into unbearable pain is the way our mind reacts to them. It is attachment that creates the wound. It is resistance that multiplies the suffering. Imagine this scene. Two people lose their jobs on the same day. One of them plunges into despair, incessantly repeating, "This couldn't have happened to me," feeling their life is over. The other, although also feeling pain, sees it as a new beginning, reorganizes, and moves on. The external event was the same, but the internal experience was completely different. Suffering is not in the occurrence, but in the mind that clings and resists. The Dhammapada states clearly, "Mind precedes all mental states. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows as the wheel follows the ox." This verse shows that it is not the world that creates our prison, but our own inability to deal with thoughts and emotions. We are the ones who give power to fear, desire, and anger. And once we yield,
these forces begin to govern our lives like invisible masters. This truth is uncomfortable because it destroys the illusion of external control. As long as we believe that pain comes from outside, we can maintain the hope of changing the world to achieve peace. But when we realize that suffering arises from the mind, there is nowhere left to hide. The responsibility is ours. It is our mind that projects unrealistic expectations, that clings to pleasure as if it were eternal, and that rejects the inevitable as if it could be avoided. We are the ones who feed the fire of dissatisfaction. This recognition changes everything. Instead of spending energy trying to reorganize life so that it never brings pain, something impossible, the path is to look inward and understand the mechanisms that produce suffering. It is to see how attachment creates anxiety, how desire creates dependence, how aversion creates resentment. Only then do we begin to understand that we do not need to eliminate external events.
We'll finally be at peace. But that is precisely the trap. The more we try to control, the more we become slaves to what cannot be controlled. This is the paradox that Buddha revealed clearly. True control is not achieved through the desperate effort to confine reality within a fixed form, but through the ability to let go, to allow things to be what they are, without being destroyed by it. Think about what happens when we feel anger. The instinctive reaction is to fight against it, to suppress it, or to let it explode against others. In both cases, anger dominates us. But if we simply observe the anger, without suppressing it and without feeding it, something extraordinary happens. It loses power. The emotion still arises, but it no longer governs our actions. The same applies to fear. When we try to resist it, it strengthens. But when we face it directly, it begins to dissolve. This is the power of the paradox. The less we fight against internal states, the freer we become from them. The classic metaphor in Buddhism is that of the river. Imagine you fall into a strong river and fight against the current with all your might. The more you resist, the more tired you become and the closer you get to drowning. But if you learn to relax your body and flow with the current, you suddenly discover you can move in a much smarter way, using the very force of the river to your advantage. Life works the same way. Those who try to control it rigidly sink. Those who learn to let go discover a level of freedom that seemed impossible. This does not mean passivity or resignation. The paradox of control does not teach that we should accept everything resignedly. On the contrary, it means acting from a place of clarity and balance, rather than compulsion and despair. When you are no longer blindly swept away by anger, desire, or fear, you can act with lucidity. True control is not about the world, but about the reactions that the world awakens in you. This understanding is revolutionary because it challenges the power model that society has taught us. The modern world says, control the market, control your time, control your image, control others. Buddha said, control yourself, and nothing else will need to be controlled. For when the mind is stable, Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. When it comes to freedom, most people think of external choices. Having money to travel, being able to change jobs, choosing where to live, or not depending on anyone. But this idea of freedom is fragile because it depends on factors that are beyond our control. If your peace depends on the bank balance, it can be destroyed in a day. If it depends on someone's approval, one word of rejection can end it. If it depends on the stability of the world, an economic crisis or a sudden loss can crush it. True freedom, the kind that no circumstance can destroy, is inner sovereignty. It is the ability to keep the mind firm and stable, even when everything around you is in ruins. It is looking at the approaching storm and realizing that no matter how much the wind and rain rage outside, there exists within you an unshakable space.
This is the freedom that Buddha taught. It is not about controlling life, but about conquering the only thing that can truly be conquered, the mind itself. Inner sovereignty does not mean the absence of pain. Loss, change, aging, death, all of these will continue to exist. But the one who reaches this state is not destroyed by these experiences. They feel the pain, but do not become a prisoner of it. They recognize fear, but do not allow fear to paralyze them. They observe desire, but do not become a slave to it. This is the difference between the ordinary person and the free person. The former is constantly dragged by their emotions like a rudderless boat. The latter has learned to navigate the turbulent ocean of the mind without being swallowed by the waves. In the Dhammapada, we find a direct teaching. Just as a storm does not shake a rocky mountain, so too the words of hatred do not shake one who has a trained and controlled mind. This metaphor is the essence of inner sovereignty. A mountain does not control the wind, nor does it prevent the storm, but its strength lies in the fact that it is not moved by them. Similarly, the person who achieves self-mastery does not control the world. They control themselves. This freedom is the only one that contrast in its most radical form. Are you the master of your mind, or are you just a puppet of your impulses? In the end, the issue boils down to a radical choice. Either you govern your mind, or you will be governed by it. There is no neutrality. The man who does not master his thoughts is a slave to his compulsions. The man who does not understand his emotions is manipulated by them. He who does not recognize his attachments lives like a prisoner, carrying invisible chains. You may have achieved external success. You may be admired. You may have possessions and status. But if your peace crumbles in the face of a word of rejection, if your joy depends on the approval of others, if your mood is hostage to circumstances beyond your control, then all of this is just a facade. You are not the master of your life. You are merely a subject of your own mind. Buddha showed that the true battlefield was never the world outside, but the world within. It is easy to conquer territories. It is easy to accumulate power. It is easy to manipulate people. Difficult is to sit in silence and face your own mind without fleeing. Difficult is to observe fear without being dominated, to feel anger without being consumed, to recognize desire without becoming its slave. The true warrior is not the one who subjugates armies, but the one who conquers himself. Here lies the harshest truth. If you are not capable of governing yourself, you govern nothing. You are carried like a leaf by the wind, believing you are in control, when in fact you are merely dragged by internal forces you do not understand. The only freedom that matters is the one that arises from self-mastery. Without it, any other victory is just an illusion. Now the inevitable question: are you the master or the slave of your mind? This is not an abstract philosophical question, but the difference between a life lived with clarity and strength or a life wasted in suffering and confusion. I want you to reflect on this. Write in the comments, in what moments do you feel that your mind still dominates you? Where do you perceive that you still lack control? This reflection is not just an exercise. It is the first step to begin